Erev Tov, everyone. In the parsha, we are introduced to the concept of Ori Miklot, which in today's popular vernacular are sanctuary cities. So the Torah says that they were to separate and dedicate certain cities in Eretz Yisrael and in Ever HaYarden for the purpose that if a person killed someone by accident without intent, there's no personal animosity here. An accident happened. So the Torah introduces us to some different concepts. So the first concept is that there's something called the Goel Adam, a relative of the person that was killed, wants to take revenge upon the person that killed him. Now, revenge is a natural human instinct. Chazal say the law and the halacha is that Adam muad lolo. Person is always responsible for what happens. And where it says ben er, ben yoshe, doesn't make a difference even if he's asleep. Whereas the case that a very big person rolled over in his sleep and crushed a child. He's responsible. Ben Mezid, Ben Shogeg. It doesn't make a difference what the intent was. There's always a liability. Nevertheless, there are instances when tragedies happen, but it's by an accident. Unfortunately, we're well aware here that there are automobile accidents all the time. And there's no intent there. But oftentimes the results are tragic. So there's a sense of revenge, to avenge the death of an innocent person. So that was the concept of Goel Adam. However, that would create a never-ending cycle, because the Goel Adam would kill the murderer, and then the relatives of the person that Goel Adam killed would in turn come to kill that Goel Adam, and it would be forever murders. So in order to abort that, the Torah provided this halacha of Ir Miklot, that the person that killed someone, it has consequences. He can't just say he's walking in the street tomorrow. Nothing should happen to him. So he has to go to an Ir Miklot, to one of these cities that were set aside, and he has to stay there until the death of the Kohen Gadol in his time. So for many, depending on the longevity of the Kohen Gadol, that could be a life sentence, that he has to stay in the Ir Miklot. But as long as he's in the Ir Miklot, he is protected from the Goel Adam. So there were 3 cities that were identified in the Parsha. We'll have it later in Chumash Devarim as well. In Ever Hayarde. And then there would be 3 cities in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, it was Hebron and Shechem and Kedesh Naphtali. And then Losi Lovo, the Gemara says there'll be another 3 cities that will be set aside. The Gemara also teaches us that there were 42 cities of the Levium. And each city of the Levium was also an Ir Miklot. So that the man technically had 48 cities that he could escape to and live there. The Mefarshim all deal, what is the purpose here? So many of the Mefarshim say it's the rehabilitation of the man who killed. The cities of the Levium were cities of Torah. They were cities of minimum commerce, maximum scholarship. There were cities where people devoted themselves to the service of Klal Yisrael and the Beit HaMikdash. So that would have a good influence on him, so that he would be able to do tshuva for what happened. Rashi here quotes a famous idea in the Gemara. There are 3 cities in Ever Hayarde, Betzer, etc., Golan. Ever Hayarde only had 2.5 tribes. West of the Jordan are 9.5 tribes. So how could it be 3 for 2.5 tribes and still only 3 for 9.5 tribes? So the Gemara says a strange teretz, because the Nefishe Rotzchim, these people were who lived in Ever Hayarde. It was lahavda, like the Wild West. They were constantly at war. They're a frontier. There are always incursions. So there always are killings. So the mindset, it's interesting how the Gemara looks at it. The mindset of people is that killings it's not so bad, because we're accustomed to it. We see that in our own society. The city of Chicago has hundreds and hundreds of murders, and nobody's moving out of Chicago. It's good, fine, well, as long as it's not my neighborhood. You're accustomed to it. Doesn't mean anything. You're in Eretz Yisrael, pretty much it's still a rarity. But it's not as rare as it used to be. And you become accustomed to it. So when you hear every day that there are killings, the Bedouins and the Arabs, whatever, okay, so it's like the weather report. You're accustomed to it. And once you become accustomed to it, so that it's easy. And therefore, because the 2.5 tribes were, so to speak, accustomed to it, so even accidental deaths occurred much more often, because that's the climate. And therefore, they had 3 Ori Miklat. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Oz Yavdil Moshe. Then did Moshe separate these 3 cities in Ever Yarden. So the Gemara asked the question, the halacha is that the 3 cities did not become operational until the other 3 cities were set aside in Eretz Yisrael. So then what is he in a hurry to do anything about it? In a practical term, he's not doing anything. And the Gemara learns from there that if a person has an opportunity to do even partially a mitzvah, partially a good thing, even if it's not going to be what he wanted it to be, he should take advantage of it. That's what Moshe came to teach us. So the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Moshe, you're not going to go there to Israel. You're going to die here in Chutz La'aretz. So Moshe should say, so this whole subject matter is not relevant to me. But that's not Moshe. Because at the moment that God told him he's not going, he started already to do the mitzvah. He said, mitzvah habov liyodi akayameno. Something good that I can do, I'll do, even if it's not perfect. You know, perfection oftentimes destroys us. My 3rd grade teacher used to always say that better is the enemy of good. You want to do it 100%, so then you don't do anything. You don't want to do it 90%. So Moshe came to teach us that that's not the correct attitude. Any good that can be done, even a partial good, should be done. And one should not take into account that maybe it's not exactly the perfection that it should be. That's a great lesson in life as to how people should behave. And the other part of the lesson is obvious, that one generation prepares for the next generation. The person shouldn't say, since I'm not going to be here, so it doesn't make a difference. You see that that's not our nature. Our nature is that we want to be remembered eternally. We do all sorts of things to make certain that we will be remembered. But if you're not in the world anymore, what's the difference? So that's the idea of nitzchias, of eternity, that underlies everything in Judaism. So what a person does in one generation may affect many generations in the future. And one should always have that vision. The famous Tu B'Shvat Medrash that we all know, that they saw an old man who was planting a tree, and it would take 70 years for the tree to bear fruit. So they said to him, "Who are you? What are you planting for? You're never going to see fruit from there. Won't blossom for 70 years. And he said, "Well, somebody 70 years ago planted it for me. So then I have to plant for the next generations as well." So these are all attitudes and values that the Torah means to teach us from these ideas that on the surface is a question of accidental murder, negligence, etc., how to decide, but there are underlying values that apply to how we behave in everyday life. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer, what's HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakas Israel? V'ficha chiv alahem Torah mitzvot shenemar Adonai chafetz